Welcome to another unit in this course on economics. This time I'm going to talk about the different types of goods. Here we can start with the difference between homogeneous and heterogeneous goods. Whereas with homogeneous goods, we have more like the archetypical example we assume to exist in economics, whereas heterogeneous goods is more the practical, real-life situation. Because homogeneous goods would actually be perfectly the same. There's no difference whatsoever between the goods. Whereas with heterogeneous goods, we assume that they are different, that different versions of the same good exist. Therefore, homogeneous goods, that's like the ideal assumption of goods in economics. Then another differentiation, which some of you might have heard in the context of micro, that's between substitution goods and complementary goods. Substitution goods means I can replace one good by another good, by its substitute. Whereas with complementary goods, I need one good to be able to use another good. So if, for example, you think about drinks, substitution goods could be, for example, Coke and Pepsi. You could replace one with the other. Complementary goods, on the other hand, could be something like a DVD player and DVDs. If you only have the DVD player, doesn't matter how many players you have, you cannot do anything with this. Same thing with DVDs. If you have a lot of DVDs, no player, cannot do anything with this. You meet this type of differentiation also if you talk about the so-called cross-price elasticity in microeconomics, because the cross-price elasticity helps you determine from the demand reactions which type of good is actually present. So whether two goods you observe are more substitutive in their nature or more complementary, or behave at least like complementary or substitute goods. Then the third pair, that's also more or less something, more practical as compared to more theoretical, because with free goods we assume that there's no upper bound to how much of this good is available. And that's actually not really feasible in reality, because every good has an upper bound on its availability. So in this context, free goods, that's just, again, an ideal situation, and we can assume that every good in the world we're confronted with is scarce. Some of them are a bit less scarce than others, but in the end, every good is scarce. Let's then continue. Another easy pair is material, immaterial goods. This could be something like goods as we know them versus services. Services as one type of immaterial goods, but immaterial goods could also be like virtual goods, or could be other types of immaterial goods. Whereas material goods usually can easily be defined as something you can see, you can touch. Then we have investment or investation goods as compared to consumption goods. And the basic difference between these types of goods is that investment goods are goods used to produce new goods, whereas consumption goods, if they are used, they're gone. They're consumed during consumption. Investment goods, if they are used, they still exist, and they are usually used to produce new investment or new consumption goods. In this regard, they are similar to what we call consumer durables and consumer non-durables. Because durables, they still exist after you use them. So for example, a book. Once you read the book, you can still read the book again and again. It's not gone once you've read it. On the other hand, most foods, most drinks, once you consume them, they're gone. So that's non-durables. So they are used up with consumption. Then we have normal goods as compared to given goods. Here, the idea is on how demand actually reacts to price changes. With normal goods, we assume if the price increases, demand will decrease. With given goods, we assume that the exact opposite effect holds, that if the price increases, demand will also increase. So given goods are more or less the extremes. That's for like ultra luxury goods, where you pay more because you buy the good not for its use but for its prestige. Or it's very basic goods. So if, for example, you are very poor, have very little money, and you only consume like meat and potatoes, and then the price for potatoes increase, so you might cut down on the comparatively more expensive meat to actually buy more potatoes. And in the end, it would look like the price of potatoes increases, you buy more potatoes. So given goods are really for the extremes in the upper part, luxury, the lower part, absolute basic necessities. In a similar line of argumentations, we can consider the inferior and the superior goods. Here, what's important is how does your demand for these goods react to income changes. If your income increases and you consume comparatively less of a specific good, then you can consider them inferior goods. Whereas if you have higher income and you consume these goods over proportionally strong, over proportionally more often, then you have superior goods. So for example, inferior goods could be like cheap food, no brand clothing, whereas superior goods would be the classical luxury goods, could be champagne or something like this. So that's one additional pair. Then another easy one is tradable goods, non-tradable goods. So which goods can be traded? So it's pretty hard, for example, for services to be traded. On the other hand, it's also a question about which goods are allowed to be traded. So for example, uranium, nuclear weapons, they're non-tradable goods because they are not allowed to be traded. Then we do not have a pair, but actually a quadruple of goods. And that's private public goods, club goods, and so-called public commons. Well, here usually the differentiation goes in a 2x2 table, whereas there are two characteristics to these goods. Is there rivalry in consumption? So if one person consumes this good, it's impossible for other people to consume this as well. And the second criterion is excludability. Can I, one way or another, exclude someone from the consumption of this good? If both of those things hold true, I have typical private goods. I have rivalry, I have consumption. I have excludability. And private goods are like the majority of goods considered in economics. However, then we also have those goods where there is neither excludability nor rivalry. That could be like lighthouses. If one boat consumes the light from the lighthouse, it's not really gone. The light is still there. Another boat can still consume this. However, it's pretty hard for the lighthouse to exclude one boat from the consumption of the light. So no excludability, no rivalry. That's actually the downside, because you cannot actually force someone to pay for something where you cannot exclude him from using this. That's why those goods are usually offered by the government, are public goods. Then we have two mixed types, the club goods. Here I have excludability, but no rivalry. And usually the excludability, as for example via entrance fees or something like this, are used to ensure that there is no rivalry. With public commons, it's the exact opposite thing. Here, we do not have excludability, and due to the missing excludability, we get rivalry. The basic idea goes back to some like village fields, or village grass fields, where all the farmers from the village get their cows or their goats to graze, and they eat all the grass. Well, if one farmer's cows eat all the grass, there's no grass left for the cows from the other farmer. So they are competing. They're rivals. And well, I cannot do anything about this situation because the field belongs to all the farmers. So I cannot include one of the farmers from using it. That's why it's called public commons. Belongs to the public, but there's still rivalry there. Well, for each of those goods, there's a whole theory underlying the discussion, whereas, as I said, in the basics of economics, we are mostly focusing on private goods. Well, aside from this quadruple, we have here another, group of three. Those are experience, trust, and inspection goods. We can basically work the other way around with this. Inspection goods. Well, if you're interested in the quality of a good, with inspection goods, you can simply take a look and you know whether this good is good or not. With trust goods, that's a bit harder. Here you first need to consume the good to know something about the quality of the good. So whereas most fruits, vegetables, drinks are inspection goods, so you can usually take a look, you see whether this looks good or not. Something like a holiday vacation, that's a trust good. You need to trust in the quality, but after you've been on holiday, you can evaluate the quality. You know it's good, it has been good or not. With experience goods, might be pretty hard at any point to give an assessment on the quality, so you really have to trust in the quality of the good. Sorry, I mixed this up. Experience goods is the vacation, whereas the trust good is you have to trust in the quality of the goods. And there, you do not really know this. Even after consumption, maybe even after a lot of consumptions, after a lot of years later, you still do not know about the real quality and the advantages you might have from the consumption of this good. Something could be, for example, university education. You trust that the university education will give you benefits in the labor market, but it's pretty hard to evaluate which advantages, which parts of your future position actually stem back to you having learned something on economics, having done a majors in whatever. So those are typical trust goods. So inspection goods, you take a look, you know something about the quality of the good. Experience goods, you first experience the good, afterwards you know something about the quality, but usually not beforehand. Trust goods, even afterwards, you cannot really be sure on the quality of this good. Well, then we have virtual goods. We could add this to the material and immaterial goods because, well, they are immaterial goods and they exist usually only in the virtual world. This could be a lot of different things. This could be something like ebooks, but this could also be some kind of loot box in World of Warcraft or something like this. So there's a lot of different versions of what virtual goods can actually look like. Then we have fashion goods. And while with fashion goods, someone usually thinks about apparel. about wearing apparel, but this not necessarily includes all types of fashion goods. Because, well, the general idea is that for a certain period of time, there's a high demand for this good, and this might go down or even later on might go back up again. And it's highly dependent on some kind of societal consensus of which goods are actually good, provide an additional benefit, are therefore demanded more strongly, and which are not. So fashion goods are usually wearing apparel and something like this, but are not limited to this type. Then the last type of good to be discussed here are so-called collection goods. That's usually relatively or very scarce goods, where the value of the good results first off from their scarcity, from their extreme scarcity, and from other people thinking that these goods are, due to the rarity or perceived rarity, something special and worth something. So the worth of these goods is just, let's call this a made-up construct by the people interested in these goods. And well, that's then basically all there is on the different types of goods I wanted to present to you in this session. So I hope you enjoyed this overview, and I say goodbye and see you next time for the next session.